In this next session, here they are. We have a panel of amazing young people curated by the Youth Affairs Council of WA. I want to also pay special tribute to Matthew Tomich, who's done all the work behind the scenes to put this group together. Your moderator for this panel is Zara Al-Hilali. Zara, hello. So I'm just going to tell you a few things about Zara because they're pretty impressive. Hey. So Zara has been described as a catalyst for change. She's studying law at Murdoch and currently represents Australia on the UN Women Youth Task Force and also sits on the Young Women's Council of Australia. Zara has represented Australia multiple times at global meetings and has been named a UN Global Leader for Gender Equality. So without further ado, thanks, Zara. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. First of all, before we commence, how's everyone doing? Let's scream it all out. Is everyone doing all right? Amazing. Sounds good. Okay, before I begin, of course, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the past and present traditional owners of this land on which we are meeting today, the Whadjuk Noongar people. It is a privilege to be standing on this country. As an immigrant to this land, it is, of course, so important to recognise that so many of us are benefiting off the colonisation of this country, and it is up to us to consistently and to continually defeat the disparities that our Indigenous brothers and sisters go through every single day. Now, joined by me today, I am joined with some incredible people. Like, when I tell you all, I have had the pleasure of working with some of the most incredible young people in the world. Let me emphasize the world. And I'm joined here today by my brothers and sisters. I will start by introducing them all. Right next to me, we have the lovely Brenda. Brenda was named Young Person of the Year last year at the young age of 17 years old. As a refugee, Brenda founded the Edmund Rice umpiring program, where she has created opportunities for a multitude of different young people. And I think that this year especially, we have recognized that there is a need for young people to be playing active roles as active citizens within the community. So to see such a young person at the young age of, how old were you, Brenda, when you founded this program? You were 8? I was 14. She was 14, sorry, big difference. But 14 years old, and she founded a program that provided a multitude of opportunities. I cannot begin to express my shock and absolute admiration for this incredible young woman sitting next to me. So please join me in giving a round of applause to the incredible Brenda. Now, I have my sister, Imara. If you have had the absolute pleasure of speaking to Imara, you know that this lady shocks the room whenever she enters into it. Imara has been an active citizen, a community leader, and an absolute inspiration to so many young people, maybe from the commencement of birth, to be honest. Maybe the hospital lady was absolutely astounded with your passion. So Imara has worked with so many different community groups, and she is a truly incredible representation of what young people should be. Her voice and her power that comes from her voice never fails to shock people within the room, and she brings forth something truly incredible. She is a light within this world, and I'm so excited for you all to hear her speak about the change and the reform that she wants to make. So please join me in giving the incredible Imara a round of applause. Thank you, thank you. My brother Hardy, everyone. Hardy, I have had the privilege of working with Hardy in the past 3-4 years within the advocacy space. And when I tell you Hardy brings forth something so unique within the mental health division and the mental health advocacy sector. Hardy, as a young refugee, came to this country and has since shocked the leadership space within Western Australia. His passion is truly profound within every single space that he has sat in. He currently sits on the National Youth Advisory Group for Headspace, acting as a representative to so many migrant and refugee brothers and sisters across the country within the fight for removing the stigma against mental health. So I'm so proud of my brother Hardy, and I'm so excited for you all to hear him speak. Another round of applause for my brother. And the incredible Kobe, whom I just met last year, but I have no doubt that his inspiration and his absolute momentum continues to shake this world. As a young Noongar man, he has tied in arts within the advocacy space, and he no doubt continues to perpetuate the need for change within many spaces for so many Indigenous brothers and sisters. I've had the pleasure of working with this incredible soul on so many different projects in intertwining art within the advocacy space and ensuring that we create so many different opportunities to prioritize diversity and inclusion. So once again, another round of applause for our brother. Now, to begin, I'm sure everyone is a bit tired of my voice already, so I think I might just pass on the mic to my brothers and sisters on this panel today. I think one thing that is truly reinforced across many of our diverse cultures is the power of storytelling. We recognise across many cultures that storytelling has the ability to change the world. And I think that 2020 has definitely reinforced the notion that our stories truly play a big role in creating change. So I think to begin the conversation, and as a good slide into the different topics that we will be discussing today, I will pass the mic on to my fellow brothers and sisters to discuss what their why is and why their stories truly shape their advocacy today. So I guess to begin, I think I might start off with Kobe. You didn't expect that, did you? But I guess, Kobe, do you want to hit the audience with what your why is and why you're here today and why you continue to create change?
How much time do we have? I am somebody who was born into, I guess, a huge context that I had no control over, and it had been something that I guess for my whole life I've been very much working through. The context that I'll talk about is my my cultural backgrounds. So while I have Nyungar blood in me, I also like to emphasize that I have English blood, I have Irish blood, I have German blood, and this is a consistency throughout the entirety of Australia. There are so many people with so many different types of blood in them, and that I really try to advocate for the harmony and celebration of as many cultures as we can. You know, what I really try to do for most of my time is to celebrate these cultures, and most of the time I do celebrate my Nyungar culture, specifically through means that I know the best, which is music. And so I like to play music. I was born in a very musical family on both sides of my family, and as of recently, I've started writing songs in other languages. So I've been writing songs in Nyungar, I've been writing songs in German and Irish, and I've been translating songs. I run a couple of healing choirs. Magical Morna Choir, which means Magical Sounds of the Bush, has been running for about 15 years now, and it was started by my mum alongside a couple of her friends, and I was about 11 when that was started, and so I was raised by this particular culture, and it's a very particular culture in the sense that it's a cultural healing culture, if that makes sense. And so this kind of stuff had been very much in the forefront of my mind when I was in my teens. I considered it a norm, being able to embrace all these different cultures, but then I came to realize that for some, Nyungar culture or First Peoples cultures were a bit of a novelty for some reason, which was very strange to me. And so what I do now is I like to emphasize that all these different cultures are norms for people. They're considered norms for some people, you know, the people who are raised in those cultures. And so, yeah, I like to advocate for celebration. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kobe. Hadi.
Hello. Ooh, it works. Hi, everyone. My name is Hadi. I'll resonate more with what Kobe was saying, the power of storytelling, because that is something that I've grown up with. 6 years ago, I set my foot on the soil of Perth, Western Australia. It was on the 8th of October, 2013 at 4:20 p.m. That day and time is marked on my heart because it was one of the most I guess, experiencing and rewarding journey. Bear in mind that I had never traveled outside my country. It was my very first long trip. And I had my mum and my little brother. I was fairly good in conversational English, so that helped throughout my journey. Growing up, I've grown up in part of Pakistan. It's a big province that we call Balochistan, which is fairly big and pretty dry, with big, huge, enormous mountains and an amazing atmosphere. So growing up in that small regional part of Pakistan, I was always surrounded with stories that were told by my grandfather and my grandmother and our families. I personally quite champion storytelling because it is something that you can live with that legacy and pass on that legacy and inspire other people in your position and many more generations who are coming. So one of the things that my father used to tell me is that he was the right hand of this leader who fled from Afghanistan, but was responsible to free Hazara people in Afghanistan. Hazaras were oppressed by Taliban in the early 2000s, and he was the right hand of this leader who was actively advocating to free citizens, men and women. Were highly oppressed by Taliban, and he was the person who was oppressing. He was sort of showing resistance in the face of oppression. And I get my advocacy and having those values all from my father, and nothing, throughout my journey, I've always shown that the same values that I grew up with, showing resistance and showing. Being vocal about my opinion and being just in the face of oppression and unjust system. That is what always championed my life. And I'll continue to do that because really I don't want to live in a society that is based on so many wrong things that took place and continue to be part of that wrongdoing and be part of their wrong policies and practices. My aim and objectives in life is really to address those injustices, move on from and stepping towards that healing process, and try to work collectively with people here. That's what we bring as a nation. That's quite special and innate in our society, that we can claim that we are a multicultural society, and there's a lot of things that we can do. We have offered throughout the years, and I've been part of a progressive society that we are, and part of an active citizenship that I'm part of. Even though I don't have my citizenship, but I still claim that I've actually fit in under the criteria of being an active citizen. Thank you.
Beautifully worded, Hadi. Yeah, I agree. Imara.
Let me hold this back because I'm really loud and I don't want you to all go deaf by the end of this. I am Imara. When I talk about myself, I guess I always begin with I was born in between two worlds. And I think that bringing it back to my why is that I've spent the majority of my life building a bridge between those two worlds. And for me, it's really significant from the angle that having mixed race heritage and, finding that, there's similarities in communities and culture, but when you're rumbling between these two different worlds and people might see you some ways and you don't see yourself in those ways, and you're having to find a way between these divides to accept and embrace who you are, and also to move into the world with different lineages and different trauma and different history, and you're carrying that weight because you're born in Australia, or you're raised in Australia, and you're having to, at least for me, begin that journey of healing culturally and otherwise, because before that it was survival, and that's what we had to prioritize, I think, in a lot of ways. So it's a huge privilege for me to be able to be someone within my lineage who can begin a lot of journeys that might have never been possible before. And to start on things and to pioneer in a lot of spaces that wouldn't have previously been occupied by people in my family generationally. So it's exciting, but it's also a heavy weight to carry. And so I think a lot of my why comes down to that if I can learn how to navigate this journey, and if I can improve myself and I can improve the communities around me, it allows other people to navigate this journey a little bit more easily and a little bit more freely than I did. And so the way that I see myself in terms of my why is to, you know, create a lot of steps and make a lot of waves so that the people behind me, the people who come after me, are able to have another elevated journey than I've had. And so the ways that I do that is really selectively choosing what I spend my time doing. It's really selectively choosing work that elevates and amplifies the voices of other people, particularly from marginalised and minority communities. But I think that we all have things that connect us. And I think that regardless of how much struggle or how many years you've lived for, there's a huge amount that each of us have to offer. And there's a huge amount that like unites and connects all of us. So it's finding that within people and bringing it out and amplifying the strengths that everybody has within them. So that's me.
Thank you, Amara. That was so beautifully worded. And I just want to pause for a second and recognise that so many of us on this panel here today are here to save ourselves, not to save anyone else. We've lived through so much trauma that sometimes it's just about pausing and recognising that in the process of saving ourselves, we will save our future generations and we will create intergenerational reform that we are after. So I recognise that and I value your beautiful insights, Amara. Thank you. Brenda?
So hi guys, I'm Brenda. So as a kid, I never envisioned myself being here. Not even as a kid, like 3-4 years ago, I would have never really envisioned myself being here, doing this, doing what I've done. So I guess coming to that realization, I realized that it's not just me who's thought like that. There's a lot of kids who are from colored backgrounds or are from African backgrounds who I guess have those sort of thoughts. So my why for doing what I do was or is just to be that role model for kids to really look up to, and I guess like realize that everyone like has the potential to do something, you know, like you shouldn't let your thoughts hold you back or the environment you're in stop you from achieving what you want to achieve. My other why is to bring like cultural diversity into mainstream umpiring, because how many times do you actually see a black umpire running on the field or a black goal umpire? You rarely see it. So if I can help kids get to that level, or if I can create that diversity within the AFL, then that right there is a dream of mine coming true. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I guess we've kind of established that so many of our panelists here today have so many different values and different thoughts, different aspirations, different dreams, but you can definitely see that there's one over prevailing notion that is so similar between all of us, and that is the value to consistently create that intergenerational reform that we are after, to ensure that our ancestors and as well as the future leaders that come from us as well live within a society that is truly inclusive to them all. So I first of all want to thank all our incredible panelists here today for being vulnerable and for also future within the conversation, presenting that vulnerability across all of the dialogue that they present us with today. It is so valuable to recognize that BIPOC people constantly come in with so many different messages and different valuable insights that sometimes isn't given enough gratitude within this society. So I thank all of the panelists here today. But I guess we'll start getting into the nitty-gritty, and I think first of all I want to jump to Hardy. Hardy, pay attention please, my brother. Within Hardy's discourse, and I think I've had the pleasure of talking to Hardy for the past couple of years, but one thing that really struck with me close to Hardy's discussion was that we live within a very multicultural society, but unfortunately it isn't inclusive enough. And I think that we can definitely see that across many sectors that we are in, from the representation of governments to Australian media, from AFL that Brenda was speaking to us about. We have a very, very long way to go. So I think, first of all, Hardy, I will first of all ask you about what you believe is the way to paving path for representative change that isn't tokenistic, because too often when we do see ourselves within the media, or when we do see ourselves within the future, within every single sector that we are in, unfortunately, we don't see a valuable representation, and we unfortunately come in with so much fear and so much apprehension that our participation is truly tokenistic. So what do you think that future leaders can do to create inclusive spaces, and what do you think that BIPOC people can do to create that change as well that is inclusive?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Zara, for that question. I think, first of all, I have to acknowledge the amazing leaders, activists, ambassadors, people that I've met, young people I've met in my life, for continuously sharing their stories, continuously working towards progressively addressing that gap, and working towards the notion of inclusivity. I think that's quite important. It wasn't, personally, if I have to reflect on my experience, it wasn't a linear pathway to really establish inclusivity in any system. We are quite bounded with different stresses, structural factors, societal factors, discourses that exist in our community. And it's not easy for that one person, and I'm personally talking about myself, to come in any sector, in any system, and bring a new idea, a new initiative, a new innovation. It takes years, and I've come to a point that I must admit that I'm exhausted, because the long-term advocacy is quite tiring. But throughout my journey, I've had rewards. I have there were successful outcomes from my work, and one of the things that I've worked on, especially I can reflect on the experience of being a part of a national youth mental health organization, Headspace, is that I started from my local center and gradually moved on to become part of the National Advisory. And that's where I speak directly with the Prime Minister and speak with the Minister for Health and coalition members and politicians and stakeholders who are involved in producing and working on models of mental health for young people in the country. So it's quite a position of privilege, I guess. But with that privilege, there was some scary points in my life where I had to really get myself out of the energy of being when holding power in some degree, because I felt that I'm coming from a position of privilege, and that really plays with the work that you do and the initiatives that you're involved. So what I've learned is to be proud and humble. I'm proud of my work that I've done, and I continuously work towards addressing the gaps in our service, especially in the mental health sector, and more broadly addressing the bigger human rights issues that we can deal with as a nation. I think we are much more resilient, and we are far greater than many nations. We have a heart, we have an open heart, we are hopeful, we are optimists in bringing people who just need a little bit of your help. We can't just shut our doors and say, no, we're not going to provide you that. We're not going to do that, because that's not who we are. That's not what we do here. But what I encourage people to really tap into your humanity and really ask yourself if you would allow people to come and establish a life, contribute to the economy, be part of the civil society, and become leaders and change and bring a reform in the system. Because what I'm exhausting in seeing the same faces and the same processes and models being practiced. That is not working. It will not work. We have to bring a different understanding, particularly in the area of mental health, because I've seen that we have passed on from the same models and practices, and we have damaged the lives of people. We need to get a better understanding around mental health, particularly with culture backgrounds and people from different diverse backgrounds. Their notion of understanding mental health is quite different. We shouldn't put them in boxes. We shouldn't put them in centers, in white rooms, and with white practices. I don't think that has been quite successful so far. So we need to really get involved in different layers of the system and produce something that many members of the community can connect with. And we have done that. We have done that with one of our programs that we call How is Your Hal? Hal is a concept that transcends across different languages. And in Arabic and Urdu and Hindi, they understand that. Because we realized that there's a different way of presenting something, and it was quite successful. We had successful outcomes. Consultations were there were amazing feedbacks from our consultations. And there was a different understanding and a different way of engaging with diverse communities. And the issues that came out, it wasn't around depression and psychosis, any of the biomedical understandings of mental distress. It was more to do with identity, racism, unemployment, and all the other stuff that happens in the lives of people, because you really have to look people in their environment rather than just focusing on the person and their problem. The problem does not associate with the person. You have to really take that out of the person and purely focus on the problem. And doing that, you have to address the structural factors, the systems that are involved, then unemployment, different stresses, the so-called functioning society that we live in. We are connected with so many areas that sometimes it gets quite heavy, particularly for life of young people, because we are working, we are getting our education qualification, and working multiple volunteering commitments, and it's exhausting. So you need to really understand that and really capture that in whatever that you're planning to do. I'm sure that went on, and but yeah.
Thank you so much, Hardy. I think that something that really comes from your words of wisdom is that many multicultural and Indigenous communities often extend their hand even when they have absolutely nothing, no resources, no support, no emotional capacity. We're always looking to extend our arm to those that are less privileged than us, because we recognize that we have lived and our communities have lived through so much that we must always make space. And I think that this is something that really does tie in with Brenda's work. And I will direct this next question to Brenda, because I know Brenda has created so many opportunities for those that are less privileged than her, specifically young people. Whilst we are all young people on this panel today, I recognize that adolescent young people specifically are often left behind within the narrative of change and within the narrative of creating reform for the future generations to come. So I guess in commemoration of International Day of the Girl Child, which passed last month, I guess, Brenda, my question to you specifically ties into how we can ensure that young adolescent involvement is actually reached within active decision-making levels. How can we emphasize the voices of adolescents if they are given no support from financial to emotional capacity to prevail within spaces that aren't really beneficial or aren't really welcoming to their own?
That was a big question. So honestly, I feel like it's really a small thing when you really think about it, because how much does it really take to get a group of young kids together and ask them what they want, or what their future ideas are, or what change they want to see? It really doesn't take much. So I feel like just putting that support and having more, like, I wouldn't say like youth centers, but having more like discussions and conversations and putting out more things that kids want to see. Because I feel like a lot of things that are put out right now for youth aren't really what the youth want, if that makes sense. Like, the youth are getting guided, like decisions are made, how would I put it?
For youth?
Yeah,
without
for youth, without the youth. Yeah, pretty much. And I feel like people have an idea of what we want or what the younger generation want, but it's like how do you 100% know if you don't take that chance and ask them? If you don't just, yeah, it's really just about asking and just supporting them, and just, I guess, putting in like steps to make sure that their voices are heard. So if that means like once a month going down to a local community center and running an event, like a small like sausage sizzle, but like, you know, or yeah, just something small like that, and you have kids coming through, and then just having that small conversation with them, like from that you can grow ideas. But you don't really see much people, I guess, doing that. And I feel like it's not because they don't want to do it, but it's just because it's like sometimes the most simplest things are the things that work best. So you could have all these like events and all these big like discussions and stuff like that, but you can have those events, but youth don't turn up to things like that. So from a youth point of view, just having like smaller things or just having like simpler discussions, I feel like that will really work in the future.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And that, my friends, is the power of dialogue and discourse. And I think that this question, this discussion specifically ties into a question from my good friend Imara, specifically surrounding what the power of dialogue and what the power of storytelling can truly do to impact reform. As we all know, in June of this year, the world was hit with a global momentum surrounding Black Lives Matter, the movement, and we not only saw it, this movement spark within the US, but we also saw so many Western Australians, so many Australians pull up for our Indigenous brothers and sisters and recognise that here within Australia, we have Black deaths occurring right in front of us, and we have failed to acknowledge, and we have failed to fight for our Black brothers and sisters, both African Australians and Aboriginal Australians. And I know that there is still so much to do, and words will never be enough to encompass the trauma that some of these communities have absolutely lived through. So I guess, Imara, my question to you, and I know that a question will never suffice to the change that needs to be done. But we've kind of seen in the past year that COVID-19 has provided multiple opportunities for digital spaces for innovative thinking. What do you think we can do, or what do you think the future is for Black lives, both African diaspora as well as the Aboriginal and Indigenous communities across the world?
Beautiful, simple question, that one. Not an easy thing to just summarize, and without going into like I had a dream speech, but kind of also going into that, I envision that in the future, I think even within our own communities, there's a lot of divides, that within African communities, within Indigenous communities, within, ethnically diverse communities, there's a huge amount of diversity, but also a divide in terms of that we are focusing on so many things because there's so much pain and there hasn't been a lot of healing. And I look at places in the world that are doing like reasonably well as a result of, like, you think of South Africa, within one generation there was a huge amount of segregation and divide, and what's changed there was having a lot of healing conversations. It was beginning to actually see our stories as something that liberates us rather than something that divides us. It was beginning to think about how, there's so much going on in the world, and when we actually begin to see, our own experiences as one, that I think is where the shift occurs. I think that's where the healing happens, because if I tell you my story about something that's been really challenging to me, you can connect with that. Like, everyone has something that's been quite difficult in their lives. And if you haven't had that yet, it's coming. But it's acknowledging that, what connects us. It's the human in you that connects the human in me. And what's created divides within countries and what's made people go, I want to be heard, and I'm going to talk about Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, is because I haven't been heard. I haven't felt seen. And every single one of us has had that at some point in our lifetime. Every one of us has, you know, mourned the loss of something. Every one of us has had to move through tremendous experiences in our lives that have shaped and changed us forever. So when we begin to talk about our stories and we talk about our experiences, we begin to learn more about our stories and our experiences. And we are able to connect with other people because for so long we've been othered. I think that people of colour, it's you're the other, so we can do anything that we want to you because you're not us. And what changes that is literally simply the opposite. It's I am you and you are me. How do we move beyond this? Let's see each other for our experiences and let's move forward together, because I can't do it without you and you can't do it without me, because either way we're just going to be angry with one another.
Now that was something. I think Disrupted Festival needs to cut that as a clip and post that on YouTube. Thank you so much, Amara. That was absolutely stunning, and I very much so. It really did hit close to heart for me. So thank you. Kobe, I guess I'll jump over to you, and I know that, and I have also experienced the power of your artwork and the power of your music. A couple of months ago, during COVID-19, I had the absolute pleasure of hearing Kobe sing, and during this time, I'm sure many of us felt more alone than ever. And during this time, I did go through a lot of overthinking, and I remember hearing Kobe sing, and Kobe just telling the entire room to just relax, pause for a moment, reflect, was something that was absolutely beautiful and profound within my life at that time. And I guess my question to Kobe essentially ties around the idea of interlinking art with advocacy, and how you have created art to create the change that you're after. I guess if you can commence maybe with giving the audience a brief overview about how your artwork has created that change and what your vision is in terms of interlinking artwork with reform, because once again, artwork is all about storytelling. And as we did mention previously, storytelling will change this world. I mean, you have listened to some of the most incredible voices within this room today, and that's also reflective of audience members today. I'm sure our stories have impacted one person or another. So Kobe, the mic is yours.
It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. There's a lot in the way that people try to understand things, try to understand the world around them, try to understand just existence. You know, people who want to try and seek understanding will often try and find it through like so many different means, already existing means, myself included. You have people who want to find understanding, and they do so through a religious means, like somebody wants to understand like how to love thy neighbor. There's instances in which people want to understand through an academic means. The way in which I understand things is through music. I see music as a huge means of people sharing their understandings of their worlds, so much so that they decided that they're going to put this ideology down into the form of a song. Traditional songlines is something that's been carried out throughout Australia for thousands and thousands of years. And I'd like to say that in a way, I'm continuing one of those traditions through the songs that I do, whether they are traditional or evolutionary in a way. I do so because I see that musicians are often not only musicians. They are a bunch of other things. You know, I do a lot of music in my time, but I'm also doing advocacy. I also study coordination and stuff here and there, and I just think that there have been some very diverse and in-depth ideologies that have been shared in our time through people that we know of, you know. I think maybe people such as like Leonard Cohen, who's a poet, has shared some, you know, hugely historical poetry, and you can see that there's a particular way that he understands the world. And then like you got people like Beyonce, who's just like one of the, in my opinion, one of the greatest thinkers of our time, you know, who decides that they're going to put this thought into this means of understanding, you know, putting this effort into this understanding. A lot of the songs that I write are a lot of songs I write, they are me acknowledging the understanding that I have received from somebody else. Some of the songs I have done, I like to say that is a means of song scribing, in which I wrote this song by not having any original words. All the words are words that have been said by somebody else, and I've put it into the form of a song, ensuring that the same understanding and connotations behind those words are there. And whenever I share those songs, I emphasize that this song was merely only arranged by me, not written by me, you know. And you could say that I'm covering. So like I can cover a song, I can cover an understanding, I can have an original understanding, you know. And this is stuff that happens everywhere, whether it's within music or outside of music. And one thing that you need to really emphasize is one thing that you really want to be able to develop is the ability to understand, the ability to reiterate what this person has said to you, just so you know, or you're able to let them know that you're understanding this person the way that they're wanting to be understood. You know, it's one thing to be able to listen and then respond. It's another thing to listen and then acknowledge what you've heard, and then that's it. You don't have. Sometimes you don't have to make a point. You know, sometimes you can say, "Oh, so what you're saying is this and this and this," and then that person's like, "Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. That's what I'm saying." You know, and it's just having the acknowledgement and feeling like you're listened to is really important, because that makes that person feel more empowered. You know, and then you see some of the greatest minds in our worlds, and they're at where they are at because they have been listened to. They felt listened to. You know, they felt appreciated, and that, you know, appreciation of your fellow person is one of the most important methods in our lives. Yeah. Thank you.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Kobe. I guess we are wrapping up to the end of this discussion. So before we do go, we do have time for a quick 15-minute Q&A. So I guess I'm not really sure how to start this, but yes, we have a question from the lovely lady.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I just bouncing off from that point, Kobe. I thought that was I actually throughout that saw a common trend where everyone was talking about communication and actually engaging, sharing stories, but also acknowledging kind of some of the trauma and things that people have been through. From someone who hasn't had much experience holding those kind of spaces, or if you're wanting to start on that journey and create that dialogue with people, it can be quite confronting. And so I was wondering if you guys had some thoughts of or experiences where it's been done really well and someone has created that space for you that you felt acknowledged and heard, and how, if we were to try to do that, we could do it successfully.
Is anyone up for it?
For me, it would be when people are willing to be uncomfortable. It's like when we're trying to have a difficult conversation and we're trying to make sure that it's comfortable the entire way through, we're setting it up to fail. Because if somebody on the other side is really uncomfortable, and normally you are when you're sitting in like a really vulnerable space and you're sharing something, you're sharing your narrative. And I want to acknowledge that, like, for all of us, it's like we're sharing our narrative. And we, you know, found a lot of peace or healing in that journey. But for a lot of people, they aren't there yet. And so having that one-to-one conversation is a huge privilege. And even hearing other people's stories is a huge privilege. But we need to be comfortable or willing to be uncomfortable in order to have these conversations. Otherwise, they're not going to be had, because if we're actually having the conversation, it's probably going to challenge something within us. It's probably going to make us feel a bit like, oh my God, have I been doing something that's wrong all the time? It's going to challenge our biases and our, you know, our stuff, right? We've got our own shit, like, that we're just like, it's going to stir it up. And that's okay, because then we can begin new, and that's important.
Kobe, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's 100% like perfect to what I've experienced in my time as well, is that when sharing music in Junga and stuff, I've come to meet so many different people from so many different walks of life, and it's been so wonderful to get to know these people. And I think one of the important things is that throughout all of our contexts, there are aspects of these contexts that are uncomfortable. And this discomfort that's faced within this context, it's not your fault, you know? It's not your fault that there's this thing that's happening, you know, that all the stuff that's happened in our time, you know, and before our time especially. And it's I think one you know, important variable to achieve coexistence is, you know, a level of compromise, you know, between each other, and understand that, like, yes, there are some uncomfortable truths about some of my cultural background. There's some other uncomfortable truths about other things, you know, and that, you know, nobody's perfect, you know, and we're all just trying to get by together, and you have to be easygoing on people, you know, and just be chill.
Thank you so much, Kobe. Any more questions?
I'm sorry, I have to go.
My name's Tom. I was realizing that the old stories can be a vehicle which people can use for telling and discussing uncomfortable things. And these come from a long time ago, and they do two things. They promote diversity, because you can tell stories about sort of Noah's Ark, about Hansel and Gretel, about the Egyptian Sphinx, or Anansi the spider, and whatever they are, they come back and reinforce our culture that we come from, as well as promoting diversity.
Thank you so much. Any comments?
Well, I think that was quite beautifully said. I think a lot of times we operate on a level where there's no resonance. You are in control of dialogue, and you expect that someone should share part of their life with you, and that's how it's done. But normally what we do, a classic example was done with me and Kobe today. We haven't met today. We just met and we start talking about culture. What he drinks tea. We love tea as part of the culture. We started going into a bit more detail of like sharing about our cultures and culture sensitivities and a lot of things. It was me being vulnerable in the presence of Kobe, because I shared part of my life with Kobe, and that's where it started the conversation without even asking our names. We just went into the culture factor sort of thing. So that's really one way of like doing and sort of having those warm conversations. And you can only do it when you become like, you have to make yourself partly vulnerable at times. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hardy. I find that that is so pervasive across many different multicultural and Indigenous communities. We often look for each other within a room where we don't find representation, and the safety of ourselves and our personalities and who we are. We essentially find our shield. Another person is always our shield because we feel comforts within those who have experienced similar trauma to us. So beautifully worded. Do we have any more questions from the audience? This is your lucky chance to speak to some incredible young people.
I'm so sorry. I have to. You have to hold. Oh, I see. Music, because there are no words. It crosses everything, and I wonder how much do we actually think and use it. Music from different cultures is also slightly different, but we eventually can sort of tune in and recognize the patterns. And I wondered whether this was a form that we're not using in our dialogues.
Beautiful question. I think I might pass this question to Kobe, given that Kobe is a lovely musician.
Yes. The importance of utilizing music as a vehicle to promote a particular ideology is definitely something that is can be utilized all throughout every demographic, in my opinion. We have so many different cultural origins of musical cultural origins, and obviously I liked to utilize the vehicle of my traditional Nyunga chanting, and hopefully one day I would like to be able to, go into traditional Irish, traditional German and English. And it's something that, like through this particular example and doing my research of this particular example, I've noticed that there are so many other instances and other examples of musical expression and ideology, some of which do utilize words. Others don't. There are other instances where there is music that don't need the words. And so some of this music is done in a way that is expressing a feeling, a background kind of feeling. The way that the music is sounding, what instruments are utilized, the tempo, the key, the time signature, all of these little variables all come together to try and emphasize a particular vibe, a particular feeling, a particular ideology. While we do utilize words, I utilize words a lot. There are a lot of instances where a song is particularly created without the need of words to bring about a particular vibe, and sometimes people can just click with that. Some people can sometimes just click and understand and empathize. What's an example? There's I love the sound of traditional music throughout various areas of India. It sounds absolutely wonderful to hear these different sounds, especially when you have a particular sound that's for a particular ceremony. Then you have, as a contrasting feature, you have like a symphony from Europe somewhere, and that symphony has again, no words, but it has highs, it has lows, it has major and minor chords, a particular sound to emphasize a particular feeling, and it is, I guess, it is in a way like one of those instruments that tries to speak on behalf of the soul when the words can't get there for you.
Thank you so much, Kobe. Before we do wrap up, I just wanted to ask Brenda her thoughts as well on this question. I know that young people, especially adolescents, have very much so touched into the music aspect of connecting amongst each other. Do you also resonate with what Kobe has said, and do you see power in music connecting all cultures?
100%. A lot of kids, like when you're happy, you listen to music. When you're sad, you listen to music. When you're mad, you listen to music. I feel like music is a very powerful tool that can be used if it's done right. I feel like there's a positive side and there's also like a negative side of music, 100%. So I guess just positively using music could 100% work in getting used together.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I guess I think we might be wrapping up now. So I guess before I do close off and before I do hand the mic back over to our lovely, she does have a mic, but I just first of all wanted to thank the lovely panelists here today. As I mentioned earlier today, it takes a lot to express your story, especially as young, diverse people living within a country that is inherently disadvantageous to many of us here today. But in also saying that, I tip my hat off to these incredible panelists for sharing their wisdom, because our wisdom is not just one generation, it is intergenerationally found within our ancestral lineage. As Imara mentioned earlier today, we hold the knowledge of so many of our family members that haven't had the power to express their voices within spaces that have been so hazardous and so traumatic to us. So I really do want to pause for a moment and make sure that the audience recognizes that there is so much power behind the words that have been spoken today. Also, before I do close off, I just want to thank the Youth Affairs Council for bringing together these incredible young people, specifically Matthew in the audience. Matthew, please put your hand up so the audience can clap for you. Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you so much to the Youth Affairs Council for everything that they do. As young people here, all of us today, we've been working with the Youth Affairs Council for so many years now that I really can't truly explore how incredible the Youth Affairs Council is to so many young people within the community. So I really do recognise that this body is so imperative to creating change for young people. So I thank the Youth Affairs Council. So with that, I close off this event, and I am so happy, so thrilled, so walking out with so much knowledge, and I thank the panelists once again. Thank you so much to the lovely audience, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Zara and the panel. That was a really inspiring panel, and I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm actually really filled with hope listening to your amazing critical thinking and the brave discussion that you've had today. And really what resonated with me was what you were talking about that place of discomfort and not running away from that and creating space for that and listening, I think. So small audience today, but I feel like we were really listening to you. So thank you so much.